for example, last year, 11.8% of their applicants were African American, 11.8% were Hispanic. That number has remained the same. It's about 20% Asian. That has remained roughly the same over 20 years as the population of college-age Asian applicants has doubled. So there's no argument, no reasonable argument against the fact that they have a quota system as they did against Jews in the 20s. And you're defending that.
Well,
Why?
Tucker, they don't have a quota system. First of all, it is unconstitutional. But secondly, when I was at Harvard, the percentage of Asian Americans was about 16 to 17%. Today it's 21%. So it's actually increased by 30% just since the time that I graduated. So it can't possibly be a quota system unless the quota numbers are changing, and then it can't be a quota system.
Unless the applicant pool has doubled, which it has. It's doubled. And that number has not doubled, as you know. And by the way, the numbers for other racial groups have remained constant because there is a quota system. Everybody's aware of it. Let me read you a quote from a man who does this for a living. His name is Brian Taylor. He runs a business that helps Asian students get into elite colleges. He said this to the Boston Globe last year. He said, "We will make them, the Asian applicants, appear less Asian when they apply." Now, why would he do that? He does that because colleges don't want too many Asians. And you know this really well. And yet you're defending it. I don't understand that at all. They're discriminating against Asians. They're open about it. Everybody knows it. And yet that's okay because why?
Well, like I said, you know, there isn't a quota system because the numbers have actually increased. And I believe they've actually increased for
not proportional
Latino
to the increase in applications.
Well.
No, actually
you're right about that. But, you know, Tucker, that is a whole other segment worth exploring about this arms race of parents trying to get their kids into schools and applying to far more colleges now than they did before. So the population has not doubled, but the number of applications that are being sent out has. And colleges like this because it boosts their numbers, makes them seem more selective.
That's actually, let me correct you there. The population has grown dramatically, and when you add the international applicants, it's not just people pushing Harvard on the Common App. It's people who are qualified to go to Harvard with 800 SAT scores and straight A's and head of student council who are not getting in because of their race. Now, I mean, you haven't addressed this, though. If college counselors are counseling their students to pretend they're not Asian, and they do this for a living, they have no incentive to lie about it, you've got discrimination going on. And you're pretending it's not there for some weird ideological reason. And what is that weird ideological reason exactly? Because racism has taken place in America in years past?
I think these are anecdotal. I certainly put down that I was Asian when I applied to Harvard. I got in. As a Harvard admissions interviewer, most of the students that I've interviewed who have gotten in have been Asian. So, you know, from my own personal experience, I haven't seen that. But I think the reason why some people might do that is because there is so much divisiveness where people are being told that, okay, if you are Asian, you're being discriminated against, and there are consultants who will make money off of, you know, the desire of parents to give their children the best opportunity to get into college. And,
it's the parents'
and maybe they believe that will heighten their chances. But I don't think it will.
Because when Princeton University, in a study that I think we both accept is real, says that you need to score 540 points higher than other students in order to have the same chance of getting in, I think it's a rational conclusion to believe that there's discrimination going on. Let me ask you one last question. You noted a bunch of painful periods of American history. Both of us abhor them. So the Japanese internment, slavery, Jim Crow, we all agree those are bad. Why are they bad? They're bad because they're examples of people in power hurting American citizens based on their race. How is that different from what Harvard is doing?
Well, Tucker, a lot of people will say that affirmative action in which African American and Latino students who are given admission over Asian students who have higher scores, they say that that's reverse discrimination. So then what do we say about the 60% of white students at Harvard who also are getting into Harvard despite having significantly lower scores than Asians?
That's bad. You know, I mean, I'm not here to defend that. I believe in the meritocracy. I asked you a simple question. So is it okay to discriminate against people on the basis of their race?
So why are we focusing on the 22% versus the 60%?
Well, because the numbers are so... I'll tell you exactly why. Because it is the hardest position to be in as an Asian student of all categories. If you are an Asian girl, it's harder to get into these colleges than if you're anyone else. And so we're picking the worst example. I could pick many examples, but my question remains the same, which is it okay to discriminate on the basis of race? I was raised to believe it's not. You apparently think it is. Is it?
No, I think that we have to recognize that we don't live in a vacuum and that racial discrimination still exists. and that we have to account for the fact that some people have a head start. And if you're going to advocate for a race-neutral policy, you're basically reinforcing the head start that some people already have.
Wait,
and
so you're saying
action is imperfect, but you know it's needed. It's part of the solution.
Is it racial discrimination to not let somebody into college based on his race? Can we just agree on that? Is it?
If that is the sole criteria that someone is not admitted into a college, then there would be something wrong with that, but that's just not the way that colleges work. They are not admitting students based solely on race. There are other factors that are involved. And, you know, I've talked about a lot of others that have benefited people, such as legacies, such as whether or not you went to a private school, if you're from the Northeast, and there are a lot of advantages.
Those are non sequiturs. I mean, you're diverting from the question. And it's this, and you know that you don't have an answer to this. But if racial discrimination is wrong, and I believe it is, then it's just wrong. I mean, there's a moral element here, I think, right?
I agree that racial discrimination is wrong, but to say that you're starting off from a clean slate as an applicant when, you know, if you are a Mexican-American student and you're worried that your parents might get deported by the next president, you know, you have a significantly different experience than
you know what?
A Caucasian
Can I say something really clear?
That.
Children are not responsible for the sins of previous ages, okay? No 18-year-old Asian or black or Hispanic kid is responsible for slavery or Jim Crow or the sins of America. I'm sorry. And to punish them for those things is grotesque. You would agree with that, right?
I would agree with that, but then why do bad things seem to happen disproportionately to these races that were subjected to racism in the past? You want to say that racism doesn't exist, but
well, of course I'm not.
The Black Lives
saying
Matter
that you're
movement
committing racism is what I'm saying.
Is because, you know, African Americans are being, you know, killed, even if they're not armed. I mean, this is something that's happening.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I'm just saying the answer is not more racism. I guess that's the point. This may be going in circles. Jay, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, just a short time ago, President-elect Trump spoke briefly to reporters outside his estate at Mar-a-Lago. Correspondent Peter Ducey is still in Palm Beach on expense account and reporting from there. Peter.
Tucker, today at Mar-a-Lago, it was Art of the Deal Expensive Airplane Edition because the president-elect sat down with the CEOs of two companies, Boeing and Lockheed Martin, that he has criticized recently on Twitter for going over budget on expensive defense contracts. The president-elect told us that the last meeting of the night was about the notoriously expensive F-35 military jet, which he previously had name-dropped as a program that he wanted to drop to cut costs at the Pentagon. And he said a little while ago he thinks he's making some progress.
Well, we're going to see. We're going to see. Just beginning. It's a dance, you know. It's a little bit of a dance. But we're going to get the cost down, and we're going to get it done beautifully. And these are great people. These are amazing people.
And your conversation with Boeing.
I'm very impressed with them. And good negotiators, too.
And we actually got to hear from Boeing's CEO today. He came out to the microphones after his meeting with Mr. Trump. They came a few weeks after the president-elect publicly complained about Boeing going billions of dollars over budget on the next generation of Air Force One. And the latest word is that the next generation of presidential planes will be produced for less than the $4 billion price tag Mr. Trump publicly announced he was afraid of.
We're going to get it done for less than that, and we're committed to working together to make sure that happens. And I was able to give the president-elect my personal commitment on behalf of the Boeing company.
The president-elect also spoke today on camera for the first time about the terrorist truck attack in Berlin. He said it was an attack on humanity. And when a reporter followed up and asked if what happened in Germany at that Christmas market has made him rethink or want to revisit proposing a ban on Muslims entering the United States, all that Mr. Trump would say is that we know what his position is and that he thinks he's been 100% right about everything so far. Tucker?
Peter, it's great to see you. Thanks a lot for that report. Well, the Democratic meltdown over Trump continues tonight. Entire portions of the Upper West Side of Manhattan, parts of Malibu and Cambridge, Massachusetts, remain in a state of mourning and denial tonight. Weeping, gnashing of teeth, sackcloth, ashes, all the rest. And, of course, we're going to include the American media in that. So why the long faces? Joining us now is a man who might have the answer from long experience. He is Andrew Stein, a lifelong Democrat, longtime Manhattan Borough President, and most recently, drumroll please, the head of Democrats for Trump. Mr. Stein, thanks a lot for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Tucker. First of all, congratulations on the show.
Yeah, I think that the meltdown is unfortunate because Donald Trump is our president. I think he'll be a great president. I know him since 1973. You know, originally I asked him when I was Manhattan Borough President to redo the Woolman Rink, which the city took 10 years to do. They couldn't do it. Donald did it in 6 months and under budget. And that's what you see he's doing with the planes. I mean, he's going to watch the people's money. He's going to cut marginal corporate tax rates, going to stimulate the economy, going to undo this Iran nuclear treaty, which I think is the worst thing America's ever done. I think he's going to be a great president, Tucker.
So, I mean, he's a New York Democrat, as you pointed out many times. He's not conservative in the way that Republicans have been conservative since Reagan. He's a real departure from that. He's closer, in fact, to a lot of people in your neighborhood, and yet they hate him more than anyone who's ever lived. If Idi Amin showed up on the Upper East Side, they'd hate him less than they hate Donald Trump. What is that about? What's the psychology of that?
Well, I think it's the mainstream media. You know, the mainstream media has been so vicious and unfair in their attacks on Donald. And most people don't really read, and Hillary was sort of the darling of the left. And I think that, and you know, the Vanity Fair, the whole thing, that they painted Donald as a sexist, a misogynist, a sexist, all this nonsense. And he connected with the middle of the country. Hillary spent the whole summer in Martha's Vineyard, in the Hamptons, and in Hollywood, where Donald Trump was out in the Midwest making 4 or 5 speeches a day to real people. But the hatred, when I came out and wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal saying that I was for Donald Trump over Hillary for president, you can't imagine in Manhattan the intensity of the feelings that I got.
I can't even. I bet only your doorman was nice to you after that.
Yeah, no, it was an amazing experience.
So you've heard from the very beginning people say Trump is a bigot. He's against this group or that group, certainly against women. You've known him, as you said, for more than 40 years. Is there any truth to that at all? You're obviously biased, but I'd be interested in your perspective.
There's absolutely no truth to it. Donald is as open-minded and is embracing of everybody based on what they are like, you know, personally, on their merits as a person. I knew his father. Donald is the least racist person I know. That's why when the mainstream media tried to paint him in this box, I just thought it's ridiculous. And now they're talking about 150,000 women are going to march on the inauguration. You know, it's a disgrace, Tucker, because he's our president. I have 2 boys. All I care about is that the country's safe for those kids. And these Democrats should give him a chance, see what he does, disagree with him when they do, but give him a chance to show what he can do. I think he's going to be one of the great presidents ever.
Certainly hope so. Andrew Stein, thanks a lot for joining us. It was great to see you. Now it's time for Twitter Storm, our nightly forecast of social media's most intense weather patterns. It is always stormy on Twitter. Last night we posted an MTV News video, MTV News, hilarious, that proposed New Year's resolutions for white men. The Twitter community not so impressed by this. DataPath Technology tweeted this: MTV doesn't want white people to buy or watch sponsored items. No problem. Paul Joseph Watson said MTV deleted that racist 2017 New Year's resolutions for white guys video, but the internet never forgets, which is true. Some of us will learn the hard way. Jack Murphy tweeted this: the double standard is insane. MTV can attack white guys, and that's not racist to the left. This is out of control. And finally, Wariver said MTV only needs one resolution for New Year's: get canceled. That's tonight's Twitter Storm. Michelle Obama says hope is gone. Kemi Bruce says hope did not deliver on the promises it made in 2008. She's here next with a list of broken promises. Also, the suspect in that horrifying German truck attack has been under surveillance. How did he carry out his rampage? There's a lot going on in Germany tonight, and it could have ramifications here. We'll go live to Berlin coming up. Abandon all hope, ye who live here. That's the message of First Lady Michelle Obama, who recently told our national confessor, Oprah, that after her husband leaves, all joy will die.
Now we're feeling what not having hope feels like. What else do you have if you don't have hope? What do you give your kids if you can't give them hope? This past election was challenging for me as a citizen to watch and experience. It was painful. Words matter. What we say, how we behave, we are modeling to the next generation. So if we want maturity, we have to be mature. If we want a nation that feels hopeful, then we have to speak in hopeful terms. If we want smart leaders, then we have to be smart voters. We cannot vote from a place of fear.
In other words, my husband was the embodiment of hope. He's gone. It's now the Dark Ages. Will be living in caves by February. Well, radio show host Tammy Bruce has thought a lot about this topic and wrote a great piece on it, and she joins us now. Tammy, it's great to see you. What is this about?
Oh, nice to be back. Thank you, Tucker. Look, it was this interview with Oprah that was, of course, for a lot of people very confusing because the election is done, and her messaging was, this is the irony, that, you know, we want hope for the American people, but now hope is dead because we lost. And I began to receive phone calls from liberal friends, mostly in California, who had actually were becoming physically ill because of the nature of the rhetoric, the fear-mongering on the left. And I felt it was a good sign because they weren't calling to hector me like they were before the election. They were calling to ask me if I really thought he was going to do the things they were being told he was going to do, which was, of course, cause Armageddon, end gay marriage, destroy the environment, etc. And what I've told people is, of course, no, that's not the case. He is generally going to make things better, and this is about jobs, it's about the economy, so that all of us can live as individuals in the way that best suits us.
It's so funny how, I mean, it's hard to understand what a politician is going to do before he takes office, of course. Yeah. But in the case of Trump, there's this weird distortion that liberals have, and I think it's sincere. They imagine he's this guy that I don't see at all. For example, I don't see him as anti-gay in the slightest. No. And yet there's all this hysteria about Trump as an enemy of the LGBT community, et cetera. Where's that coming from? And is it, you watch this carefully, is that rooted in any kind of reality?
No, it's not. And look, he is the first nominee and the first candidate, the first president-elect for the GOP to actually embrace the actual gay pride flag in a public forum. This is a fellow who is really a pragmatist. He's a populist. I find Mr. Trump, I think, to be somewhat ambivalent about the social issues. He's really a live and let live kind of guy, but he likes to make deals, as we've been covering, of course, on the Boeing situation, et cetera. He cares about jobs. But when you think about hope, and this is the irony of Mrs. Obama, that hope is not a plan. Hope is the thing that you have when things are going wrong. That real hope can't exist unless you actually have a job, you have an income, you have a future that you can plan for your children, that you actually are able, your house is not underwater when it comes to its mortgage, that you have your health, you can actually get an appointment with the doctor that you know. Those are the things that bring you hope. The Obamas have presented it as though, look, this is the new normal, this is going to be awful, and we're going to just at least emotionally encourage you. The election was about actually wanting genuine hope built on action, actions that are going to allow people to know what the future is for themselves and their family. That's what real hope is.
When there are 95 million people out of the workforce, it's a little hard for me to sit there and listen to hope lectures, but there's also this weird egomania behind this where we are the embodiment, it's almost a religious posture. We're the embodiment of hope, and now that we're gone, nothing will ever be the same. I mean, what does that say about how they see themselves?
Well, it's very strange. It's cult-like a little bit, but it's also the antithesis of what they claim to be for. If they really cared about the nation in an existential way, they would want the sensibility of hope to continue. But it's also, as a feminist, 3.7 million women pushed into poverty in these last 8 years, the 95 million people out of the workforce, as you've mentioned, the suicide rate being at a historical high. I know. All of these things, and this is what the American people, that's supposed to be about hope. We deserve better, and we at least know there's a chance that we're going to get better coming up. So for every liberal, I'll bring you hope in saying that there's an action plan to actually make your lives better, and that everybody can relax and have a fabulous Christmas and be able to have a good time with your families, because we're going to be okay.
Amen. That's right. Thanks a lot, Tammy Bruce. Great to see you. Well, here's something new. The more social media platforms you use, according to a new study, the more unhappy you get. The analysis was published in the journal Computers and Human Behavior, something you probably haven't read this month, but it was pretty interesting. It found that people who use 7 to 11 different social media platforms had more than 3 times the risk of depression and anxiety compared to those of us who use 0 to 2 social media platforms. The question for researchers is it the chicken or the egg? The analysis says it's unclear if people who suffer from depression or anxiety gravitate toward a range of social media, or if the social media are causing the depression, though I think common sense suggests the latter. But to be safe either way, log off once in a while and have an actual conversation. That helps. Next up, how dangerous are those allegations, and you're hearing them constantly, that Putin stole the election for Trump? Our next guest says it prevents an urgent discussion, and it may cause grave dangers to this country. One of America's preeminent Russia experts joins us next. Well, if you've been watching the news this past month, you've heard a lot about allegations that the Russians interfered in our presidential election. We've tried to get to the bottom of that. What exactly are the allegations, and are they true? Well, tonight we're being joined by really one of the most famous Russian studies professors in America, Stephen Cohen. He teaches at NYU and Princeton. And he says those allegations actually have bigger implications that might cause international problems for us and for Russia. Professor Cohen joins us now. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Some would say infamous.
Infamous. Certainly of long standing.
And still worse, I live on the weepy Upper West Side, but I do have some hope. I do have some hope.
So do you think, I mean, you follow this as closely as anybody, is there evidence, real evidence, that the Putin government stole the election for Trump?
Well, you've interrogated several people in pursuit of facts for that. You haven't found any. I haven't found any. And until they produce some, the answer is no.
No. Oh, that's the conclusion I am reaching. And yet the U.S. government, the Obama administration, the president himself says he is in some unspecified way retaliating against Russia. We're doing that right now. I'm not exactly sure what that means. What are the implications of that?
Well, let me tell you where I think we are with Russia now. In my lifetime, it's the worst and most dangerous moment since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Our relations with Russia are fraught with the possibility of war, from the Baltics and Ukraine to Syria. Meanwhile, we're making these accusations against Russia, and I think part of the accusations, I can't be sure about this, but many of the people who are pursuing them are actually trying to stop President-elect Trump's vow to establish a new cooperative relationship with Russia, which I think is essential for American national security. I'm not pro-Kremlin, I'm pro-American national security.
Yes.
But if you can discredit Putin as a war criminal, as a guy who despoiled our democracy, then how will Trump get the traction to go ahead and begin what we used to call détente? By the way, I don't know why Trump hasn't mentioned this, but détente, or cooperation with Russia in a time of Cold War, which we're in again, was a Republican presidential policy. Began with Eisenhower, continued by Nixon, and of course Ronald Reagan, to his eternal credit, was the greatest pro-détente president we've ever had.
So it almost seems, I mean, I would take it one step farther from reading accounts in the newspaper every day that there are some people on both sides, on the neoconservative side, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and then on the sort of institutional Democratic Party side, the Clintons, Barack Obama, who seem to seek conflict with Russia, not just prevent détente, but engage in some hostile way with Russia. What's the motive? Do you know?
Well, I used to live among liberals and progressives, so it pains me to say that the new Cold War on the American side, and not a little neo-McCarthyism, is coming from liberals and progressives primarily. I mean, the point is that, I mean, I can't remember in my lifetime when a publication like the New York Times would refer to the man who has been elected president of the United States as a lackey of the Kremlin. Where have we gone? When a New York Times columnist says that Donald Trump is the Kremlin's poodle and Putin's puppet, we're libeling our own president. But it may be, I mean, who can be sure, but it may be that they are absolutely determined to prevent the kind of cooperation with Russia that will make it safer. I'll go one step farther and say, maybe to the horror shock of some of your viewers, that Vladimir Putin is potentially America's most essential, valuable national security partner. And I refer here in particular to the war against terrorism, and we always omit one thing. The terrorists are in pursuit of nuclear material. If you put those two together, and nothing could be more dangerous today.
Well, I know that you're going to be denounced as a lackey yourself of Putin, but I mean, everything you said makes sense, and I'd be interested to hear the other side. I'm not sure that they're is one. Very quickly, where is the potential flashpoint between the United States and Russia going forward? Where will we look for trouble to start?
Well, since we're flying warplanes and the Russians are flying warplanes over Syria, probably there. But Ukraine is explosive, and as we talk, NATO is undergoing a major military buildup on Russia's western borders. And let me leave you with an anecdote, or at least something I hear in Russia. Russians say that never has Western power been amassed on Russia's western borders, as it is today, since June 1941, the German invasion. So Russians are in high anxiety. Their nuclear weapons are on high alert. We are going crazy, defaming anybody who says, shouldn't we debate or think this over? And it is really dangerous.
I agree with that. It seems lunatic, actually, to me. And I really appreciate your perspective on this, Professor. Thank you very much. Up next, one Republican elector is putting his anti-Trump letters to good use. Sheriff Richard Jones of Butler County, Ohio, was a Republican voting in the Electoral College just the other day. He got thousands of letters from people trying to persuade him to change his vote from Trump to somebody else. So what did he do with the letters? He lit them up, literally.
No more letters today. We've got our electoral votes, and we've got a new president. We've got our Trump sign here, and we've got our cows over here. They're supporting Trump also. So as you can see, thousands of letters are going to be right here today in the old fire pit. God bless America.
Well, that, of course, caused a stir. A Butler County Democratic Party executive chairwoman called the stunt childish, not noting it was also very awesome. But the Butler County GOP executive chairman says he proudly supports the sheriff's actions. Of course he did, and they roasted marshmallows at the end. Well, a massive manhunt, meanwhile, underway for the lone wolf terrorist, apparently lone wolf, who plowed his truck through a crowded Christmas market in Berlin. A horrifying story. We're going live to Germany next. We've got a Fox News alert right now. A manhunt is underway at this hour across Europe for a newly identified suspect in that horrifying Berlin Christmas market attack. According to investigators, the man had known ties to terror, not surprisingly. And here in the U.S., President-elect Donald Trump talked to reporters about what it all means. Watch.
It's not an attack on humanity. That's what it is. It's an attack on humanity. And it's got to be stopped.
FSN correspondent Ira Spitzer is live in Berlin right now with more on what is happening in this investigation. Ira, what's the latest?
Well, a 23-year-old man, a Tunisian man named Anis Amri, is now the prime suspect in the terror attack in Berlin that killed 12 people a couple nights ago by driving a truck into a crowded Christmas market. And he is the subject of a Europe-wide manhunt at the moment. And what's really sort of shocking here to many people is that he was actually known to the German authorities. He apparently arrived to the country last year, applied for asylum in Germany earlier this year, and had that asylum application rejected. So then he was slated for deportation. However, he could never actually be deported from Germany in one case because he didn't have ID, in another case because he couldn't actually be identified definitely as a Tunisian citizen. So he was under surveillance also because of his apparent ties to radical Islamist networks here in Germany, and even suspected of being a danger to the state. So a lot was known about this man. However, they apparently stopped their surveillance in September. He then slipped under the radar and only resurfaced when they found his wallet in the truck that crashed into that Christmas market.
Ira, thanks a lot for that. Appreciate it. Sad story. Horrifying, actually. Remember last week when we had on one of the leaders of the California secession movement? Well, the group now claims they just opened an embassy. You'll never guess where it is. Moscow, of course. Over the weekend, the group's leader, who currently teaches English in Russia, held an event at the Moscow location. They say the embassy will not deal with diplomatic issues, of course, because California is not a country, but instead will act more as a cultural center to educate Russians about California's history, to boost trade ties and tourism. The group hopes to vote on the California secession by the spring of 2019, and you can be certain we will cover it extensively here. Well, a University of Michigan student claims she was attacked by a Trump supporter, but one big problem that never actually happened. She may be facing charges. Kimberly Guilfoyle responds to all that, and then some personal facts you might not know about old KG when she joins us in the Friend Zone. That's next. Plus, if you were king for a day and you had absolute power, if you were a diabolical dictator, what good would you do? How would you improve America? You have a lot of ideas. Keep them coming. Twitter address @Tucker Carlson or Tucker Carlson tonight @foxnews.com is our email. We'll be right back. Time now for the Friend Zone, when we round up the coolest people here at Fox News. They're all cool, but we have some of the coolest on this show and invite them on. And tonight we're joined by really one of the coolest, Kimberly Guilfoyle, co-host, of course, of The Five. And I got a story for you, KG, that I want your reaction to. So a Muslim student at the University of Michigan claimed recently that a man threatened to light her on fire, to immolate her after Trump won, and it turns out it was a hoax. Now, what's interesting about this story is that it seems so familiar. I feel like I've seen this movie before, maybe several hundred times.
Yeah,
what's going on here?
That's the problem. I mean, it seems to be like the thing to do when people are bored or run out of friends on Snapchat or Instagram. They're like, hey, let's get my hoax on. And it's just really incredibly damaging, and it really does cause a problem. You know, as a former prosecutor, when you see people make these false criminal allegations of such a serious nature, it really undermines the true victims that are out there that crimes happen to. It wastes valuable resources for the police department and investigators to try to go over these things. And it's sad. It's really just been a product of the mainstream media, the liberal left trying to demonize this election, demonize the president-elect and any of his followers that were called by the other candidate, Hillary Clinton, deplorables and irredeemable. So very disturbing every time you hear one of these stories and you think, wait, is this the last one I just heard? And then there's another one on the heels of it.
Well, people get a lot out of being victims, but the downside is that it just makes everyone hate each other, and it increases the level of fear and distrust and disunity in the country in a pretty dramatic way. I mean, that's a real sin to do something like that.
I could not agree more. It is really the height of dishonesty, and really just in terms of pushing forward an agenda of hate and fear and really pulling apart the unity that we're trying to come together, you know, as a country. I mean, these people are committing acts essentially against everybody else by pretending to be victims, drawing attention to themselves, and creating an atmosphere of fear and hysteria that is quite damaging, you know, to public safety as well.
So this is a small point, but I totally forgot it. So the Trumps are moving to town. There's this question, what is his wife going to do? She's, of course, the First Lady of the United States now. What's her role? You were a First Lady. Yes. I completely, of all the many things you've done in your life, let me just interject really quickly. Kimberly Guilfoyle is one of the people here at Fox who has, as we say, lived a life outside television. She's done a lot. But you were First Lady.
Yes, I started back way in the day. I'm working out, you know, in politics and doing campaigns like governor and mayor and city council and all those good things in district attorney's office. And I was able to meet who you see there, Gavin Newsom, and that's us on election day going to vote together. And the other picture was with his father, Judge Newsom, who was getting sworn in. There we are with Sharon Stone, one of the Hollywood elite, at one of the functions events that we hosted. So it was a very interesting, you know, time. I was really happy to serve the city and county of San Francisco as both First Lady and also as head of the trial division for the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. That's election night right there. So very interesting. They call it the Camelot of San Francisco.
Yeah, I always felt you were kind of the brains behind the operation. Just my view. I have to confirm that or not.
He wouldn't dispute that. He, you know, he's very generous in his praise and opinion of me. So, and he's now, you know, lieutenant governor, and he's running for governor of California.
Interesting.
And that's when we had the royals there, and I do my Kimberly's Royals segment on Fox. But yes, with Prince Charles and Camilla, that was their first official visit to the United States, and they selected 3 cities, and we were lucky enough to host them in San Francisco for a number of days. We had a wonderful time, and Prince Charles is so fabulous and very generous. He used to give me his extra desserts all the time because he didn't finish them. I said, are you going to finish that? I'll take a bite.
So did you have a program? Were you for literacy or gardening or no? You're busy being a prosecutor, I guess.
Yeah, he likes all the whole like subsistence farming and organic and growing. It's interesting you say that. But yeah, I was working as a prosecutor. Then I took a leave of absence because they said that's too much power on one mattress, the DA and the mayor. So the thing was, what happened was we ended up having special programs for me to be a part of, which was I worked with children's cancer groups, which is really important to me at the various hospitals in San Francisco, like UCSF. And it was a really rewarding experience, yes, in education and outreach to disenfranchised youth and at-risk juvenile offenders as well.
Man, I wish you'd been mayor. That city could use you badly. Kimberly Guilfoyle,
Take me now.
one of our favorites. Thanks a lot, Kimberly.
All right,
Good
thank
to see
you, Tucker. Merry Christmas.
See ya. Thanks. Merry Christmas. Coming up next, you're almost out of time to tell us what you would do if you had absolute power, total power. You were omnipotent. You can tweet us at Tucker Carlson or email Tucker Carlson tonight at foxnews.com. Well, you never need to feel powerless when you watch this show because we give you power, absolute power, Ursat's imaginary power, but still power. And we ask the question, if you had it and could do anything you wanted, how would you improve this country? Well, Jess tweeted this: I would make sure Kellyanne sat in the office right next to our new president for 8 years. Good call. Locke's alter ego wrote this: eliminate MTV, comma, obviously. Andrew J. Falsinator, probably a false name, wrote, make bacon an official food group, as if it's not already. Wendy King said, discover the cure for cancer. Good for you, Wendy. That may happen, by the way. Tony Richards tweeted this: go back to wearing bow ties. That's grotesque. Of course not. Pete Franklin wrote, move Super Bowl to Saturday. Everyone parties and eliminates 10% of the workforce calling out sick on Monday. That's inspired. John Citizen wrote, turn back time 60 years to when America was great and one United States. We never locked our front door in fear. Wistful, but true. Finally, Brown tweeted this: Tucker, surprisingly, you haven't received pushback on not having the hashtag Queen for a day. Thank you for noticing. Maybe we'll do that. All right, tomorrow, Today in Pomposity returns. What's the most pompous thing you have heard? Not just false, but pompous, insufferable, Thurston Howell the third level annoying. Tweet us at Tucker Carlson or send us email. That's about it for us. Tune in every night at 7 to the show that's the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. DVR the show. And above all, stay tuned for Bill O'Reilly. He's up next.